Hey, hi, how are you? And welcome to Destiny 2. My name's Felt, and oh boy, if you're ready for salty Felt, if you like salty, angry, complainy Felt, this is the video for you. Spoiler warning for the new Destiny season. I will absolutely be spoiling the crap out of this season. Hardcore. I need to find a new instance. That's fun. That's a problem with the season that, don't you worry, we'll get into why that's a problem tonight, today, this evening. I'm recording this in the evening in case that wasn't obvious from the way that I just said that. Well, let's talk about how this new season has left a terrible first impression on me, and it'll probably make me just not want to play it in general as time goes on. We are 2 weeks into the season, right? 2 weeks, and I've already hit the point of barely wanting to continue playing it. It's another just endless grind of you're leveling up reputation, you're leveling up vendors with their grids, and you're finding deep sight weapons, which we'll get into that in a minute, just to get bad versions of the guns to then be able to eventually craft the good versions of the guns, which just doesn't feel great. Let's start with why I think the seasonal event being an actual just weird public event is bad. First of all, we've complained about this several times across the course of the game series, about how just grinding public events feels bad. It requires your randos to know how to do it. And by randos, I mean the random other peoples in your instance. No offense to anyone here. I don't know if these people know how to do the mechanics or not. But in the case of this one, there's not really mechanics, so it's now instead a very dumbed down public event that doesn't even require your teammates to know what they're doing for you to be able to do anything. Which means you just kind of turn your brain off and grind, which isn't incredibly fun, for the most part. And just being forced, essentially, to do a public event over and over and over and over and over again for seasonal progression feels bad. Being forced into the same activity endlessly, even if it is a new activity, is not great. And the fact that it is essentially a run around and kill a bunch of enemies for maybe 10 minutes event makes it feel even worse. I just really don't like it, and I have a huge problem with the fact that this is what they chose to do. This is now the essentially third time we've had this as a quote-unquote seasonal / general activity for people to do. We had Escalation Protocol way back in Warmind. We had the Blind Well and Forsaken, and now we have this, where literally all you do is group up as a giant pile of people and murder a bunch of ads until you get to a boss fight, which has minimal mechanics because it needs to be able to be done by a bunch of people with no communication. It's just not great. It's just not great, and I'm really sad they went back to this old system. Other things that were a big letdown with this system, Solar. You might be thinking, but Felt, think of all the customization. What customization? One of the most important mods is broken. We don't have access to all of our fragments. I'll use the right words. We don't have access to all of our fragments because for some reason they hid it behind a community event thing where you do 20 million of this new public event and then you finally get full access to all the fragments that they should have just unlocked for us at the beginning of the season. Can you tell I don't like that decision? The whole point of this season was that we had this big old hype moment of, Solar rework, and then you tie half of the rework. And by half of the rework, I mean 2 of the things that are not able to be unlocked are some of the better sounding ones, like Ember of Char, meaning your ignition spreads Scorch, which is insane if you know what that means, and solar weapons give restorations and radiant effects, extended duration. You mean 2 of the things that, 1, Warlocks would love to get their hands on, and 2, anyone would love to get their hands on, are just not available at the start of the season because you wanted people to grind your new public event? You mean to tell me that? I really think that's a bad decision. And like I said, this is salty, angry, complainy Felt. Because man, it just frustrates me to not actually be able to use the full new system that they promised us because they want us to just do the new event first. It's not even tied to a story beat. It's tied to a community-based thing of as the community does 20 million of these events, they'll eventually be able to be purchased again at the vendor. Not my favorite idea. Okay, so now that I've complained thoroughly about this new seasonal event for probably 4 minutes now, let's talk about the story beats and why I think that was also not grand, and why, if the pattern that I predicted week 1 continues, I'm going to just be generally very unhappy. Especially because of how it continues. So, story spoilers. Here's your final warning. I've warned you a few times here. Story spoilers. Week 1, we find out about Crow dealing with the Echo of Uldren, the Nightmare of Uldren. Week 2, he's already come to terms with it, it's already been solved, and that part of the story is now done. He had 1 week of dealing with the Nightmare following him around and being a problem. 1 week! 1 singular week is all the time of real-world time that got to be a thing. 1 week? That is not anywhere near enough time to cover that story beat. I don't care if it's done differently. I just care that 1 week is not enough time to cover what is essentially supposed to be someone's trauma. And them learning how to deal with their trauma. 1 week is just not enough time. And by the way, I'm doing this live in case you're wondering why I'm like pausing my speech to look at some of the stuff I got. Wow, cool, I got the rocket launcher, which leads me into another one of my points that I'll get into in a second after I finish talking about how I hate the fact that it's one week, and if the pattern continues, that's all it's going to take for any of the other people to deal with their trauma and emotional response, and that's not how real life works, first of all. Even if these are old, deep-seated things that these people have been dealing with for, you know, years of their lives, it just feels really wrong to have this entire arc this character goes through, this entire set of emotions they're supposed to experience. It feels wrong to have it solved in a week. It really, really bothers me. And I'm just really not a fan of the way they handled it. I think that is just way too fast of a way for you to handle something like that, you know? Now that I've covered that, and the fact that if the beats are true, this isn't even me talking about leaks or anything, this is just a prediction I had in week 1, that if the story beats that I feel like are going to happen are going to follow through the way that I think they will, it means next week we'll have introduction of probably Zavala and the nightmare he has to deal with. Week after that, solved. Week after that, Keitel and the introduction of the nightmare she has to deal with. Week after that, solved. Oh boy, wow, what an interesting season. 6 weeks and we've solved everyone's trauma and past emotional responses. Oh boy, that feels really good. That feels really good. Alright, now that I've finished complaining about why I dislike how fast-paced the story is, and oh boy, do I really hate how quickly they solve these problems, let's talk about systemic issues that I really, really, really hate. That I don't know why they didn't fix. Don't get me wrong, weapon crafting was improved this season. I do not want to take away from the efforts they made. They made good efforts. Deep sight weapons take a lot less time to finish. They took away most of the materials required to craft weapons, so now in place of having 5 to 7 materials, or something crazy like that, it is now 1 material that works for everything. Which is great. The fact that I need to get lucky and get 5 weapons to drop, each of them with a deep sight resonance attached to them, is fucking bullshit. That is way too many weapons. Straight up, that's just way too many weapons. That is just way, way, way too many weapons. I have to get 5 weapons that drop with a rare drop on it. That's essentially the same as just farming out a god roll. And in my case, most of the time, I would find the weapon I wanted before I finished farming out my deep sight. The exact thing happened to me when I was farming out raid weapons last season, where I got a perfect, essentially, perfect version of one of the breech-loaded grenade launchers that I wanted, well before I finished being able to unlock the crafted version. It just feels bad. 5 is just much too many, and I really wish they would change it, and the fact that you have to get the weapon to drop 5 times with that specific thing is just frustrating, and I really, really hope that's something that they're keeping in mind. Whew. Ooh, I told you this was going to be salty, angry felt. Now let's talk about the dungeon. Dungeon, least disappointing thing about the season. Dungeon is a dungeon. It's pretty average. It didn't really let me down, didn't really excite me. Kind of sits just dead set in the middle of the road. It's a dungeon, so I'll give them credit. Dungeon's a dungeon. I'll probably want to grind that out a bit for the cool loot in it. I think they did a good job with the way that the loot drops in the master version, making it so that you really want to grind the master version to get all the better loot, all the better armor. So we'll give them mad props there. However, the fact that that's really the only thing that seems to be exciting about the season that isn't going to be a boring, tedious grind It's kind of annoying. Don't get me wrong, I love grinding. I do relic weapons inside of games like Final Fantasy XIV. I've played Borderlands for years. I enjoy grindy stuff. I still play many of those games and still do tons of the grinding in them. This is very tedious, boring grinding, though, and it often gets on my nerves. Especially because it hasn't changed in its base functions in years. Speaking of boring, tedious grinds, the fact that, I did probably almost all of my powerfuls for the week to try and get a single drop, and I didn't get anything in that slot. The slot that if I got a drop and it would actually upgrade me an entire power level is kind of frustrating. The power grind is honestly just as bad as ever, if maybe even worse. I can't truly say worse. They made it slightly better due to the fact that you can, in fact, now have extra ways of getting pinnacles each week by doing the weekly featured things. Yay. So while the Vow of the Disciple raid, because it is current, still gives you pinnacles, now every week there'll be a different raid. Last week it was from doing the final encounter in Last Wish, you got a pinnacle. Wow. This week it's from doing the final encounter in Garden, you get a pinnacle. Wow. They added that for dungeons as well. This week, I believe I just saw it was Pit of Heresy giving the pinnacle. Crazy. But there's no way to guarantee that's what you need. There's no way to say that you cannot physically go weeks without ever once getting the drop you need. There's no way to guarantee ever getting a slot. There is no way to guarantee it, and that is just a straight-up problem in a game that is built around grinding power that has a finite endpoint. If there's no finite endpoint, if it's something like Borderlands, where eventually it'll just get stronger and stronger and stronger. You okay, buddy? As you can tell, I'm doing this live. If it's a game like Borderlands, where eventually it'll just get stronger and stronger and stronger until you just stop trying to get perfection. If it's a game like Diablo, where you're just getting stronger and stronger and stronger as you continue grinding up perfection, going up to the highest level you possibly can until you personally just choose to stop. There isn't that. There is a finite endpoint. There is a point when you stop getting stronger armor, and that is at 1570. The fact that I can, in fact, go weeks on end without getting anything that will push me towards that endpoint feels incredibly bad. I don't think that's something anyone will ever complain about. Sorry, I don't think that's something anyone will ever not complain about. The system is just flawed at its core. Or I shall play this game. Honestly, most weeks I don't know. I just kind of play it out of a sense of habit and love that I used to have for the game. At the moment, I can't say I enjoy it anywhere as much as I used to in the past. Its current state is something that feels unfun most of the time. It feels flawed. It feels like a boring grind to make a number go up in place of an enjoyable grind to grow more powerful. I hope that they find some way to make this problem that a lot of players have change. And you might be like, well, just play a different game. I do. I absolutely do. That's why I play different games. However, I want to enjoy this game. I want to enjoy the power grind in it. And there's so much about it that is just flawed at its core that makes it just hard to enjoy. And there's nothing that I personally can do about the fact that I feel like they have problems with the power grind. There's nothing that I can do about feeling like they don't reward my time investment by making sure that I will eventually get some of the drops that I need and the slots that I need. There's nothing that I can do about that and change about that, because that is what I have problems with the most. So this was mostly a almost clear the air styled video of, like, if you ever see me playing this game or talking about this game or bitching about this game, you just have a general idea of why I have these problems, and you have them in a semi-structured way. I have a script up next to me, even if I wanted to do this video live so I could just really get across, like, my actual emotional response to things, because this is mostly an emotionally driven video, because it's how I feel about the game, not so much how I feel about the designs or choices. It's how the game makes me feel and how I feel like it has problems. If that makes sense. That's why this is scripted but live, if that all checks out. As you can tell, I'm trying to phrase this in a way that makes it come across properly, but it's very hard to do on the fly. The bottom line is I want to enjoy this game. I want to enjoy the stuff in it. I want to do this, play this game more, because few things are as satisfying as running around, dodging in circles, throwing flaming daggers at my enemies, and then shooting a barrage of ice-based laser beams at them like I just did right there. But with all the systemic issues in this game, I can hardly even enjoy this because I don't really get to do this in ways that are interesting to me or exciting to me. I get to do this in an event that I don't really enjoy, to grind for loot that I don't really want, simply to get higher powered for a future season where me putting in all this effort might feel a bit better because there's a new raid that launched. So yeah, that's my current feelings about the Destiny season. Thanks for hanging out and watching. If you liked it, leave a like. If you didn't like it, leave a dislike. If you have comments, questions, concerns, any of that, leave a comment. If you want to see more crazy content like this, tell me in the comments below. Either way, thanks for hanging out and watching, and I hope to catch you in the next one.